A poor girl is wearing an old t-shirt to wrap her little brother. The young billionaire asks, "Aren't you cold?" She smiles through trembling lips. "I am, but I'm the older one. I protect him." And the billionaire falls to his knees when he sees the baby's face. Caleb Mason adjusted the wristwatch that cost more than many people's annual salary. 29 years old, a billionaire, and completely alone. The irony did not escape him. His latest tech company report showed a 40% growth in the last quarter. The world loved what he created, but nobody really knew him. From the window of his top-floor office, New York sparkled under the night sky. Lights of every kind glimmered like fallen stars as the snow started to come down in thick flakes. Caleb shut down the computer and grabbed his coat. "Any plans for the evening, sir?" asked Martin, his assistant, waiting discreetly by the door. "None. Your house is ready to receive you. The temperature has been adjusted and dinner—" "I'm not going straight home," Caleb cut in, pulling on his leather gloves. "I need to walk around a bit." Martin hesitated. "It's snowing hard out there, sir." Caleb only shrugged. The cold didn't bother him as much as the emptiness inside. Minutes later, he was on the street. He dismissed his driver and the armored car. On nights like that, he preferred to be just another face in the crowd, even if his coat cost more than a luxury car. He walked aimlessly, feeling the snow accumulate on his shoulders, watching couples holding hands, families heading home, friends laughing loudly in cozy bars. They all had somewhere to go, they all belonged, everyone except him. With every step he took, he moved farther from the center. The imposing buildings gave way to simpler structures. Fancy storefronts were replaced by small, closed shops. The clean streets became less cared for. He hadn't planned to come to this part of the city, but his feet had led him there. That was when he saw her, a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Sitting on the sidewalk, dark, tangled hair, a face pale from the cold. In her arms, a small bundle she clutched tightly. A baby. She wore only a thin sweatshirt, and she'd taken off an old jacket to wrap around the little one. Next to her sat a worn-out backpack. Caleb stopped. For a moment, he thought about walking on. It wasn't his concern. The city was full of problems his money couldn't fix, but something pulled him toward that scene. Something he couldn't explain. He approached slowly, so as not to scare her. "Hey," he said, crouching down to the girl's eye level. "Aren't you cold?" The girl looked up. She had big brown eyes and a maturity in her gaze that no child should ever have. "I am," she answered, holding the baby tighter to her chest. "But I'm the older one. I protect him." Those simple words hit Caleb like a punch to the gut. Protection, responsibility. Something he knew well, a long time ago, before everything changed. "May I see?" he asked, gesturing toward the baby. The girl hesitated for a second, then shifted the bundle slightly so he could look. The baby was asleep, cheeks flushed from the cold. He couldn't have been more than a few months old. Then it happened. Upon seeing the baby's face, Caleb froze. The little one's features, the shape of his nose, his mouth. It was like looking at the face of his brother Lucas when he was a baby, the brother who disappeared at age 5, leaving a hole in Caleb's life that nothing ever filled. The resemblance was so strong, so overwhelming, that Caleb's knees nearly gave out. He sank onto them on the snow-covered sidewalk, shocked and emotional as a wave of memories he had long buried crashed over him. Lucas laughing, Lucas sleeping in his crib, Lucas holding his hand as he learned to walk. "Mister, are you okay?" The girl's voice pulled him back. Caleb fought to steady himself. He was on his knees in the snow, trembling, and not from the cold. He said, his voice hoarse. "I'm fine." The girl watched him curiously. "My name is Ellie," she said, as if trying to help him calm down. "This is Noah. We're hungry, and we got lost. We don't know how to get back home." Caleb looked at her, still dazed by the rush of memories. There was something special about these children, something that felt like a sign, a second chance. For years, he'd buried his past pain under layers of work and money. He'd built an empire, but lived in a void. And now, in the middle of the night, in the middle of winter, He found these two little souls who needed exactly what he had to give. Without a second thought, Caleb took off his coat and draped it over Ellie and the baby. His decision was already made. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. "You'll be safe now." Ellie looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. Her child's eyes seemed to see beyond appearances, as though she could see inside him. "Do you promise?" she asked, with a seriousness impressive for someone so young. Caleb felt a lump in his throat. "I promise." Ellie picked up her backpack with one hand and with the other took Caleb's hand. The contact was small and fragile, but to him it felt as heavy as the whole world. Snow continued falling around them as they walked away together along the sidewalk. For the first time in years, Caleb felt something besides emptiness. He wasn't exactly sure what it was. Maybe purpose, maybe hope, maybe just the weight of a promise. And at that moment, that was enough. The cab stopped in front of the wrought iron gate protecting the property. Through the thickly falling snow, the mansion's lights shone like beacons in the darkness. Caleb helped Ellie out of the car while she held Noah tightly against her chest. "Do you live here?" Ellie asked, eyes wide at the place's grandeur. Caleb handed the driver a large bill. "Yes, I do." As the taxi pulled away, Caleb entered a code on the panel beside the gate. With a soft click, the gate swung open, revealing a pathway lit by small lights embedded in the ground. He noticed Ellie hesitating. "Come on," he said gently, extending his hand. "It's too cold out here." Ellie took his hand, and together they made their way to the entrance. The girl was shivering under Caleb's oversized coat, and Noah made small sounds of discomfort. "Martin!" Caleb called upon entering the spacious foyer. Within seconds, a well-groomed man with grey hair appeared. His face showed a fleeting moment of surprise at seeing the children. "Sir," his voice was calm, professional. "We need hot food, dry clothes, and a bath for these two," Caleb said, helping Ellie out of the snow-covered coat. "And we need to improvise a crib for the baby." Martin paused only briefly before nodding. "Certainly, sir. I'll take care of everything right away." "And Martin?" "Complete discretion about this." "As always, sir." While Martin left, Ellie stared around, clearly impressed by the foyer with its high ceiling and crystal chandeliers, and the marble staircase curving elegantly upward. Noah stirred more in her arms. "He's hungry," Ellie explained, gently rocking her brother. "He hasn't eaten properly in a while." "We'll fix that," Caleb replied. "Come with me." He guided Ellie through the house until they reached the kitchen, an extensive, modern space with stainless steel appliances and a large central island. Caleb seldom came there. His meals were usually served in his office. Now, he opened the refrigerator, realizing he had no idea what to give a baby. "What does he eat?" he asked, feeling strangely inadequate. "Milk," she answered. "But it has to be warm. Dad always heats it up a little." Caleb found some milk and poured a bit into a small pan. While he warmed it over low heat, Martin came in carrying a tray of food, steaming soup, fresh sandwiches, fruit, and cookies. "Here," he said, placing the tray on the table. "I thought something simple might be best for starters." "Thank you, Martin. I'll prepare the bedrooms now," the assistant continued. "And I've arranged for some children's clothes to be delivered in less than an hour." Caleb nodded, grateful for the efficiency of the man who had worked for him for almost a decade and never asked unnecessary questions. "Is the milk ready?" Ellie asked, adjusting Noah in her arms. Caleb tested the temperature. "I think so. It's warm, not hot." He poured the milk into a cup and handed it to Ellie. "Do you have a bottle?" "No, I don't." "That's okay," Ellie replied with surprising calm. "I can use a spoon." Carefully, she sat down at the table and began giving her brother milk, spoonful by spoonful. It was a slow, meticulous process, but she had clearly done it before. Her movements were precise despite her small hands and the obvious fatigue on her face. Caleb watched silently, feeling a mix of admiration and sadness. In his business world, he was used to dealing with ambitious, competitive adults, many of whom showed half the responsibility or dedication of this 7-year-old child. "Aren't you going to eat?" he asked, noticing Ellie hadn't touched her own food yet. He goes first, she replied simply, not taking her eyes off her brother. Always him first. Something about the way she said that deeply moved Caleb, a conviction so pure and unwavering that he wondered when was the last time he felt anything like it. When Noah finally finished drinking, Ellie repositioned him in her arms, wiped his face with a napkin, and only then started on her soup. She ate slowly at first, blowing on each spoonful, but soon her hunger overcame her caution, and she ate more eagerly. Still, Caleb noticed she tried to maintain good manners. "Is there more?" she asked timidly after emptying her bowl. "Of course," Caleb said, serving her more soup and placing another sandwich on her plate. "Eat as much as you want. There's plenty of food." As Ellie ate her second helping, Martin returned to the kitchen. "The rooms are ready, sir. I've provided diapers, baby wipes, and some basic items for the baby. The rest will arrive from the store in the morning." "Thank you, Martin. Here's my number," Martin said, handing Caleb a card. "If you need anything during the night, don't hesitate to call. I'll be in the guest house." After Martin left, Caleb led Ellie and Noah upstairs. He had prepared 2 connected bedrooms, one for Ellie with a large and comfortable bed, and another for Noah, where Martin had improvised a crib with pillows and a padded basket. "Let's give you both a bath now," Caleb said, realizing just how far he was from his comfort zone. Bath time was an adventure. Caleb filled the bathtub with warm water and helped Ellie wash her hair, while she insisted she could do it by herself. For Noah, Caleb needed detailed instructions from Ellie on how to hold the baby correctly, how to keep water out of his eyes and ears. "It's not that hard," Ellie said, seeing the concentrated look on Caleb's face. "You've never done this before." Caleb shook his head. "Never? Not even with other babies?" "I don't have any other babies in my life," he replied, surprised at his own honesty. Ellie seemed to mull that over for a moment. "You don't have family?" The question caught Caleb off guard. Into flash, images of his past crossed his mind. His parents, his missing brother, the house where he grew up. "No," he finally answered after a pause. "I don't have a family." After the bath, Caleb dressed Ellie in one of his own t-shirts, which nearly reached her ankles. For Noah, he used one of the diapers Martin had provided. The children's clothing would arrive soon, but for now this would do. "This is your bed," he said, showing Ellie the guest room. The king-size bed looked enormous next to the small girl. "And Noah will sleep right here next door." Ellie looked at the improvised crib in the adjacent room and then at Caleb. "Can I sleep with him? He'll be scared if he wakes up alone in a strange place." "Of course. I'll keep the door between your rooms open, and I'll be right across the hall if you need anything." He placed the baby in the improvised crib and pulled up a chair so Ellie could sit beside her brother. However, she was so exhausted that her eyes soon began to close. Caleb gently picked her up and laid her on the bed, making sure she was well covered. For a moment he stood there, watching the 2 children sleep. There was something oddly familiar about the scene, as though part of him knew he was meant to be there, doing exactly this. Caleb returned to his own room, leaving the doors slightly ajar. He lay down, but sleep refused to come. His mind swirled with questions. Who were these children's father? How could he have let them end up in that situation? And why, of all the people in New York, was Caleb the one who found them? Around 3 in the morning, a sound broke the silence of the house. Crying. Noah was crying. Caleb got up immediately and went to the children's room. Ellie was already awake, trying to calm her brother. "What is it?" Caleb asked, turning on the light. "He's hot," Ellie said, her small face twisted with worry. "Really hot." Caleb approached and touched the baby's forehead. It was burning. Noah's crying was weak, heartbreaking, and his breathing sounded strained. A wave of fear shot through Caleb like an electric current. He had no idea what to do for a sick baby. This was completely uncharted territory. "Ellie," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "are you feeling all right?" Ellie coughed, as though the question triggered something. "My throat hurts," she admitted, "and I'm cold. Really cold." Caleb noticed she looked pale too, her eyes bright with fever. Without wasting time, He grabbed his phone and dialed Martin. "I need a doctor," he said. "Now, the children have a high fever." "I'm on my way, sir," Martin replied. "I'll bring Dr. Winters with me." The next 40 minutes were the longest of Caleb's life. He tried to soothe Noah, who kept crying, though more weakly now. He placed cool compresses on the baby's forehead. He gave Ellie water, and she was visibly shivering. When the doorbell finally rang, Caleb rushed to answer. Dr. Winters was a middle-aged man with a serious expression, carrying a medical bag. "Where are the patients?" he asked, skipping any formalities. Caleb led him to the room. The doctor examined Noah first, checking his temperature, listening to his chest, looking at his throat. Then he did the same with Ellie. "It's a respiratory infection," he diagnosed, "probably from extended exposure to the cold and worsened by poor nutrition. The baby is also dehydrated." "Is it serious?" asked Caleb, feeling something he didn't recall ever feeling, absolute fear of losing someone. "No, it's not serious. Yet," the doctor added, "but we need to treat them immediately. I'll prescribe antibiotics for both and something for the fever. The most important thing is to keep them hydrated and warm." Dr. Winters prepared an injection for Noah, explaining it would work faster that way. For Ellie, he gave a syrup she swallowed with a grimace. He also left detailed instructions about the medications and care required over the next few days. "I'll come back tomorrow to see how they're doing," he said, closing his bag. "But call me anytime if the baby's fever spikes again or if his breathing worsens." After the doctor left, Caleb picked Noah up. The baby seemed so tiny and fragile in his arms. The fever had gone down a little with the medication, but he was still hot and restless. "Will he be okay?" Ellie asked, her voice hoarse. "He will," Caleb promised. "I'll take care of both of you." He sat in a chair with Noah, and Ellie settled next to them. To Caleb's surprise, the baby calmed down in his arms, maybe soothed by the warmth of an adult's body. "You have to rock him like this," Ellie said, demonstrating a gentle motion. "And singing helps." Singing? Caleb couldn't remember the last time he had sung anything. Anything. "Dad sings that boat song." Caleb hesitated, then began humming a lullaby his mother used to sing to him and Lucas when they were small. His voice was raspy from lack of use, but Noah seemed to like it. His little eyes began to close. Ellie snuggled closer to Caleb, shivering slightly. "Are you cold?" he asked. She nodded. Caleb grabbed a blanket and draped it over her, keeping her close. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked softly. "How did you get lost?" Ellie glanced at Noah, then at her own small hands. "Mom died when Noah was born," she said, her voice sad. "The doctor said she got sick. Dad was really sad." Caleb felt a surge of compassion. "I'm sorry, Ellie. Dad takes care of us by himself. He works a lot. He builds walls, construction. And what happened today? He left for work in the morning, said he'd be back for lunch, but he never came. We ran out of food, and Noah was hungry." Ellie paused. "I thought I could find food if I went out, or find Dad, but then I couldn't find my way back." Caleb could see she was trying not to cry. "You were very brave," he said. "You took really good care of your brother. Do you think Dad is looking for us?" "I'm sure he is." Ellie fell silent for a moment. "He must be really worried." "We'll find him," Caleb promised. "Tomorrow we'll start looking." Ellie nodded, seeming reassured by the promise. A few minutes later, she fell asleep against Caleb's arm. Noah was also asleep, his breathing still heavy but calmer. Caleb stayed there, holding both children. He thought about putting them back in their beds, but he couldn't bear to let them go. He felt he needed to keep them close, protected. It was a new sensation for him, this protective instinct. For the first time in years, Caleb felt tears in his eyes. He wasn't sure exactly why he was crying, maybe for Ellie's sad story, maybe for Noah, so small and already motherless, or maybe for himself, for all the years he spent building walls around himself, convinced he didn't need anyone. In just a few hours, these two kids had torn down all those walls. Caleb looked at Noah's sleeping face. The resemblance to Lucas was still there, like an echo of the past. He thought of their father, Jack. A man who had lost his wife and was now likely frantic, searching for his children. Caleb knew what it was like to lose someone like that. He knew that pain. But now, sitting in that chair holding the two sleeping children, he was experiencing something different. It wasn't just the void of loss anymore. It was the fear of losing again. It was the fierce need to protect. And for the first time in a long while, it was the start of something he'd forgotten how to feel. A connection. The night wore on. Caleb stayed in the chair, alert to every change in Noah's breathing, every movement from Ellie. Every hour, he checked the baby's temperature, following the doctor's instructions with near-obsessive precision. Eventually, the sky began to lighten. The snowstorm had passed, leaving the city covered in a silent blanket of white. The first rays of sunlight were streaming through the window when Martin knocked softly on the door. "Sir?" he called quietly. "I brought breakfast." Caleb motioned for him to come in. Martin seemed surprised to see his employer in the chair with two sleeping children in his arms. In all his years of service, he had never seen Caleb Mason in that situation. "How are they, sir?" Martin asked, setting the tray on a table. "Better, I think. The fever's gone down, but they're still weak." Martin nodded. "Dr. Winters called. He said he'll be here around 10. "Great. Would you like me to take care of anything else, sir?" Caleb thought for a moment. "Yes. Cancel all my appointments for the next few days, and I want you to get everything these kids might need. More clothes, toys, books, whatever." "Certainly, sir. Anything else?" "Yes." Caleb hesitated. "We need to find their father. His name is Jack. He works in construction. That's all we know so far. But I'll try to find out more from Ellie when she's feeling better." Martin nodded. "Understood, sir. I'll begin the search immediately." After Martin left, Ellie stirred and opened her eyes. She looked confused for a moment, until her gaze met Caleb's. "Good morning," he said softly. "Morning," she replied, her voice still raspy. "Is Noah better?" Caleb glanced at the baby, sleeping peacefully in his arms. "I think so. His fever's gone down." Ellie smiled, relieved. Her face was still pale, but her eyes looked less feverish. "You stayed here all night?" she asked. "I did, just like Dad does when we're sick." That simple comparison made Caleb feel both proud and humbled at once. Being compared to the father these children clearly adored was an honor he hadn't expected. "I'm learning," he said with a small smile. "You've been a great teacher." Ellie smiled back, and in that moment, Caleb knew something had shifted inside him, something fundamental and irreversible. In just one night, these children had become important to him in a way nothing and no one else ever had. And he would do anything to protect them, even find the man who might take them away. 3 days had passed since the night the children fell ill. Under Caleb's constant care and Dr. Winters' daily visits, Noah and Ellie recovered quickly. The fever had disappeared, the coughing had subsided, and their appetites had come roaring back, especially Ellie's, who now asked for seconds at almost every meal. On the morning of the 4th day, Caleb woke up to a sound he'd never heard in the house before. Children's laughter. Light, carefree, childlike laughter. For a moment, he stayed in bed, just listening. It was as unfamiliar as it was welcome. He got up and followed the sound to the living room. There, he found Ellie sitting on the rug with Noah, playing with colorful blocks Martin had provided. The baby clapped whenever Ellie built a tower, and she laughed each time he knocked it down with an enthusiastic smack. "Good morning," Caleb said, involuntarily smiling. "Morning," Ellie replied, turning around. "Noah doesn't have a fever anymore. I felt his forehead like you do." "That's great news," said Caleb, sitting on the floor with them. "And how about you? How do you feel?" "I'm good. I'm not even coughing anymore." To prove her point, she took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "See?" Noah crawled over to Caleb and tugged at his pajama pants for attention. Without thinking, Caleb picked him up and lifted him into the air, making the baby giggle. It was something he never would have imagined himself doing days ago. "Shall we have breakfast?" Ellie asked, already on her feet, ready for adventure. "Sure. What would you like today?" Ellie considered the question seriously. "Pancakes. The kind with sweet syrup." "Pancakes it is," Caleb agreed, holding Noah in one arm and offering his free hand to Ellie. The kitchen, once virtually unused, had become the heart of the mansion. In the past few days, Caleb had learned how to make baby bottles, which had now arrived along with other baby supplies, how to make oatmeal, and even how to bake chocolate muffins following Ellie's enthusiastic instructions. While Caleb mixed the pancake batter, Ellie settled Noah in his new high chair, another recent addition. The girl had naturally taken on the role of kitchen helper, handing Caleb whatever ingredients he needed and watching every step closely. "You cook well," she commented as he deftly flipped a pancake in the air. "Dad cooks too, but sometimes he burns stuff." Caleb smiled. He didn't mention that until 3 days ago his cooking repertoire was mostly coffee and toast. In the last 72 hours, he'd learned more about domestic tasks than in his entire 29 years of life. "Dad says we need to know how to cook because food is love," Ellie continued, passing the maple syrup to Caleb. He learned that from his grandma. Caleb placed pancakes on 3 plates, a small one for Ellie, a tiny one for Noah, cut into small pieces, and one for himself. As they ate, he noticed how much the kitchen had changed. Ellie's drawings were taped to the fridge, colorful toys lay on the counter, a baby bottle dried on the dish rack. The smell of coffee mixed with the sweet aroma of pancakes and the mild scent of baby powder. His home, once pristinely clean and organized, almost sterile in its perfection, was now full of signs of life. A small blanket thrown over the sofa, a rubber duck forgotten in the bathtub, a doll sitting on the chair in his office. And Caleb realized, somewhat astonished, that he didn't mind it at all. After breakfast, Martin arrived carrying more purchases. Clothes for the children, more toys, diapers, and a baby stroller. "I thought you might like to take a walk in the garden today," he explained. "The weather's nice, and the fresh air will do the children good." "Excellent idea," Caleb agreed. "Thank you, Martin." The assistant nodded and turned to leave, but paused for a moment. "If I may say so, sir, the house seems different." "Different how?" Martin hesitated, choosing his words. "More alive, sir." Caleb looked around at the toys, at Ellie helping Noah eat, at the small changes that had occurred so quickly. "Yes," he agreed. "It is." Later, with the sun high overhead, Caleb took the children out to the back garden. It was an expansive, well-tended space with a perfect lawn, strategically placed trees, and flower beds. Ellie ran around on the grass while Caleb pushed Noah in his new stroller. "You have a really big yard," Ellie said, coming back to him. "You could have a swing here and a slide. You like swings. They're my favorite. At the park near our house, there's a blue swing that goes super high. Dad always pushes me." Caleb mentally noted to install a swing. Maybe a whole playground set. They sat under the shade of an old oak tree. Ellie drew with colored chalk on the stone path while Noah played with soft blocks on a blanket. Caleb watched them, noticing how quickly he'd adjusted to this new routine, waking up early to make Noah's bottle, helping Ellie pick out her clothes for the day, preparing meals together, reading stories before bedtime, singing to Noah when he was fussy, teaching Ellie how to play chess, and pretending not to notice when she cheated. It was a life so different from the one he had before. His days, usually filled with meetings, conference calls, market analyses, and business decisions, were now measured by small victories. Noah's first smile aimed at him, Ellie learning to tie her own shoelaces, a full night's sleep without anyone waking up crying. "What are you thinking about?" Ellie asked, interrupting his thoughts. She had crept up quietly and was watching him curiously. "I was thinking about how everything has changed," Caleb answered honestly. Ellie nodded, as if she understood perfectly. She sat beside him, crossing her legs. "Do you live alone?" she asked. The question caught him off guard, partly because they had already talked about it. "I do," he said again anyway. Ellie looked around, at Noah playing, at the drawings on the ground, at the scattered toys. Then she turned back to Caleb, her big, serious eyes fixed on him. "Not anymore." 4 simple words, spoken with the kind of certainty and simplicity only a child could muster. But they struck Caleb with unexpected force. He felt a lump in his throat and blinked hard against the sting in his eyes. "No," he managed. "Not anymore." Ellie smiled, satisfied, and went back to her drawing. Caleb remained seated, processing the wave of emotion that had just swept over him. Not anymore. Ellie had put into words what he already knew, but hadn't admitted to himself. These children had filled a void in his life he hadn't even realized existed. The days that followed settled into a natural routine. Caleb was surprised by his own adaptability. He, who had always been methodical and controlling in his professional life, now took pleasure in the unpredictability of days with the kids. A week after the children arrived, Caleb and Ellie were in the library after dinner. Noah had already fallen asleep, and Ellie was flipping through a large animal book before bed. Caleb was responding to a few emails on his tablet when Ellie spoke up, still looking at her book. "Do you think my dad is looking for us?" The question was asked casually, but Caleb sensed the weight behind it. He closed his tablet and gave her his full attention. "I'm sure he is," he said with conviction. "Any father would." Ellie nodded, still staring at the pages. "He must be sad. He's always sad when he's not with us." Caleb felt a pang of guilt. As much as he was enjoying the children's presence, someone out there was suffering because they were gone. A man who, judging by what Ellie said, loved his kids deeply. "What's your dad like, Ellie?" he asked softly. Her face lit up. "He's strong," she said proudly. "Really strong. He can carry me on his shoulders and not get tired." Caleb smiled. "And what does he do? What's his job?" "He builds walls," Ellie explained, gesturing with her hands. "He stacks bricks until they're really tall. Our house has a blue wall he built. He let me pick the color." "Is your house far from here?" Ellie shrugged. "I don't know. You have to walk a lot, I think. Can you describe your house?" Ellie closed the book, excited by Caleb's interest. "It's small but pretty. It has a blue wall at the front. The gate is crooked because our neighbor's truck hit it once, but Dad said he'll fix it when he has money." She paused, thoughtful. "And we have Tico," she added, "our small white dog. He's tiny, but he barks a lot. Dad says he thinks he's a lion." Caleb smiled, imagining the scene. A modest house with a blue wall, a crooked gate, and a little white dog, and inside, a hard-working man doing his best to raise 2 kids alone after losing his wife. "Your dad sounds very special," Caleb commented. "He is," Ellie said with absolute certainty. "He's the best dad in the world." Later, after putting Ellie to bed, Caleb stood for a long time looking out his office window. The moon was high, lighting the garden with silvery beams. He made a decision. The next morning, while the kids were still asleep, he summoned Martin to his office. "I need you to find someone for me," he said, cutting straight to the point. "Certainly, sir," Martin replied. "Who?" "The children's father. His name is Jack. He works in construction, possibly as a bricklayer. There's a house with an outer wall painted blue and a damaged gate. There's also a small white dog named Tico." Martin jotted down the details. "Anything else, sir?" Caleb thought for a moment. "The wife died in childbirth with the boy. That would have been 8 or 9 months ago, and according to Ellie, they lived walking distance from here, although far for a child could mean anything." "Understood," Martin said. "Shall I hire someone to assist with the search?" "Yes, the best private investigator available. Money is no object. I want results quickly." Martin nodded. "I know someone, an ex-NYPD detective, very respected, discreet and efficient. Perfect. Hire him immediately." When Martin left, Caleb looked out the window again. Part of him dreaded the result of this search. In just a few days, he had grown more attached to the children than he would have thought possible. The idea of giving them back, no matter how right, was unexpectedly painful. But another part of him, the part that had begun to understand what it truly meant to care for someone, knew he couldn't be selfish. Jack was out there, probably desperate for his missing kids. And although Ellie and Noah seemed happy here, they missed their dad. Caleb let out a long sigh. It was time to do the right thing, even if it broke his newly awakened heart. Thomas Reeves was the kind of man who went unnoticed, and that made him excellent at his job. A former NYPD detective, now a private investigator, he had a knack for blending into the crowd. That morning, dressed in faded jeans and a worn jacket, he looked like just another construction worker searching for a job. 2 days earlier, he'd gotten a call from Martin, Caleb Mason's assistant. The case seemed simple. Find a man named Jack, a bricklayer, father of 2 kids, Ellie, 7, and Noah, a baby. The wife died in childbirth. The house had a blue wall, a crooked gate, and a white dog named Tico. It wasn't much, but Thomas had worked with less. His first stops were the city records department, followed by construction unions, then various construction companies. He compiled a list of men named Jack or Jacob who had recently lost their wives and had 2 children. Surprisingly, the list was shorter than he'd expected. On the 3rd day of the investigation, Thomas was driving through a working-class neighborhood in the northern part of the city. It was the kind of place with modest houses, narrow streets, and people who worked hard to get by. Exactly the kind of place where a widowed father of 2 might live. That was when he spotted his first real clue. A small house with a faded blue front wall. The metal gate was visibly crooked, as if it had been hit by something heavy. Thomas parked across the street and waited. Jack Lewis woke up before the alarm, as he had for 10 days now. 10 days since his children disappeared. 10 nights of nightmares and no sleep. 10 mornings of waking up with the same crushing pain in his chest. He sat on the edge of the bed and rubbed his face with his calloused hands. His eyes burned from fatigue, and his stubble made him look even more worn. Tico, the small white terrier, trotted over and rested his head on Jack's knee, as if he understood the man's sorrow. "Good boy," Jack murmured, petting the dog. "We'll find them today, I'm sure." But the truth was, his certainty waned with each passing day. Each morning felt harder to believe Ellie and Noah were still okay, still alive. The apartment was far too quiet without them. Without Ellie's laughter, Noah's occasional crying, or the sound of small feet running down the hallway. Jack went into the kitchen and turned on the coffee maker. While he waited, he looked at the fridge covered in Ellie's drawings. One depicted 4 figures: him, Ellie, Noah, and Mariana, his family. But Mariana had been gone almost a year, taken by complications during Noah's birth. Now his children were missing too. The guilt ate at him like acid. He should have come home for lunch as promised. He should have left more food. He should have called to say he'd be late. So many should-haves that choked him. That fateful day, Jack had picked up an extra job, one that paid enough to buy Noah's medicine and a new coat for Ellie. He couldn't refuse. But the job took longer than expected, and by the time he finally got home, it was already dark. And the house was empty. Since then, his life had been consumed by searching. He left before dawn and returned late at night. He walked the streets, asking everyone if they'd seen a 7-year-old girl with a baby. He visited shelters, hospitals, police stations. No luck. The police had filed a missing persons report, but Jack knew 2 kids from a poor family weren't a priority. "They probably ran off, and they'll be back soon," the officer had said, with barely concealed indifference. Jack finished his coffee, fed Tico, and prepared for another day of searching. He had no recent photos of the kids to show. He'd sold their only camera months ago to cover rent, so he carried only their descriptions and the fragile hope in his heart. At the construction site where Jack worked, his co-workers noticed his change. He'd always been quiet but dedicated, with an easy smile when talking about his kids. Now he was just a shell, moving mechanically, laying brick upon brick with precision but no life in his eyes. "Jack, you need rest," said Miguel, his friend and colleague. "You won't help your kids if you collapse from exhaustion." Jack just shook his head and kept working. Rest meant thinking, and thinking meant imagining what might have happened to Ellie and Noah. And that was unbearable. At lunchtime, while the other workers gathered to eat, Jack took his sandwich and went off to a corner by himself. From there, he could watch the street, the passers-by. Every child he saw made his heart leap, only to crash again when he realized it wasn't Ellie. That's it, that Thomas Reeves had been watching the house for a few hours, when he saw the small white dog slip out the front yard and run along the sidewalk. A moment later, a man appeared at the door, calling, "Tico, get back here, boy." Thomas smiled. Another clue confirmed. When the man stepped out to retrieve the dog, Thomas got a good look at him. Around 30, tall, broad-shouldered from manual labor, dark hair, unshaven. His face bore unmistakable signs of someone who hadn't slept well in days. The investigator discreetly snapped a photo on his phone and sent it to Martin with the message, Possible target located. Checking. Thomas waited until the man and dog went back inside, then crossed the street. A quick glance at the mailbox confirmed J. Lewis, probably Jack Lewis. Now he needed final confirmation. He returned to his car and waited. Soon, the man came out, locked the door, and headed off on foot. Thomas followed at a safe distance. Jack walked to a bus stop and boarded a bus toward downtown. Thomas followed in his car, keeping the bus in sight. 20 minutes later, Jack got off in an area with several construction projects underway. Thomas parked and watched Jack enter one of the building sites. After a few minutes, he approached and talked to one of the workers. "Morning, I'm looking for a job. Who's in charge here?" The worker pointed to a burly man in a yellow hard hat. Thomas thanked him and headed over. "Morning, sir. I'm looking for work as a helper. Any openings?" "Not at the moment," replied the foreman, "but leave your name and number. If something comes up, I'll let you know." Thomas thanked him and, as if casually, said, "I saw a friend of mine come in here. Jack. Haven't seen him in a while. How's he doing?" The foreman frowned. "Jack Lewis. He's not doing well. His kids disappeared about 10 days ago. It's a tragedy, especially after he lost his wife." Thomas felt a surge of professional satisfaction. He was on the right track. "Wow, I didn't know. That's terrible. Does he have pictures of the kids? I can help look." "No pictures. The girl is 7, dark hair, big eyes. The baby is less than a year old. If you see them, call the police or let him know. Poor guy's lost everything. First his wife was Mariana in childbirth, now this." Thomas thanked him and left. Back in his car, he called Martin. "I've found our man, Jack Lewis, bricklayer, widower, 2 missing kids, a 7-year-old girl and a baby. House with a blue wall, crooked gate, and a white dog named Tico. His wife, Mariana, died in childbirth with the boy." "It's him." "Excellent work," Martin replied. "Send me the address and all details you have. Mr. Mason will contact you directly." Jack returned home later than he'd planned. After work, he'd scoured a few more streets, asked at more stores, shown a drawing of Ellie he'd made to more strangers. No luck. When he finally got home, Tico greeted him with excited barks, the only welcome he had now. Jack fed the dog, took a quick shower, and ate a tasteless sandwich. Then, like every night, he grabbed a beer and sat on the back door's threshold. Tico settled beside him, and together they stared at the small, dimly lit backyard. Part of him knew it was irrational to wait there. Ellie wouldn't magically appear in the backyard, but another part, the one clinging to even the smallest hope, insisted he needed to be there in case they returned. "Where are you?" he murmured into the silent night, a single tear sliding down his tired face. The next day, Thomas personally delivered his report to Caleb Mason. The billionaire received him in his office, while the children slept in another room of the mansion. "So you're absolutely sure?" Caleb asked after reading the report. "Positive, Mr. Mason? Jack Lewis is the children's father. Everything matches. Physical description, the house, the dog, the construction job, the wife who died in childbirth. Plus he's been searching desperately for 2 kids who disappeared about 10 days ago, exactly when you found Ellie and Noah." Caleb nodded slowly. Part of him had hoped there was some mistake, that the children's father was someone else, someone who didn't deserve them. But the report painted a picture of a hard-working man, devoted to his kids, devastated by his loss. "He seems to be suffering a lot," Caleb said, almost to himself. "Yes, sir. I've rarely seen anyone so consumed by guilt and despair. He barely sleeps, works all day, and spends every spare minute searching for his children." Caleb felt a tightening in his chest. He'd grown attached to the kids more than he ever thought possible, but he couldn't ignore this man's pain. He couldn't be so selfish as to prolong his suffering. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Your job is done. Martin will handle your payment." After the investigator left, Caleb remained seated in silence for a long time, contemplating what he had to do next. The answer was obvious, despite the pain it caused. He got up and went to the room where Ellie was resting. The girl was awake, looking through a storybook. "Hey," she said, smiling when she saw him. "You look sad." Caleb sat on the edge of the bed. Ellie, remember when you told me about your dad? About your house with the blue wall and the crooked gate? And Tico? Ellie's eyes went wide. Do you know where he is? Caleb hesitated for just a second. I think I do. Does he still want us? She asked, her voice suddenly small and scared. Caleb felt a lump in his throat. More than anything. Ellie smiled, but a shadow of worry crossed her face. Are we going back home? Yes, Caleb answered. Tomorrow I'll take you to see your dad. Ellie was silent for a moment, processing the information. Will you come with us? The question caught him off guard. I'll take you there. But then you'll leave, Ellie pressed. Caleb had no answer. The idea of walking away from the children entirely was too painful to bear. But what alternative did he have? What place would he have in their lives once they were back with their dad? We'll figure that out tomorrow, okay? He deflected. Now you should get some rest. Later that night, alone in his bedroom, Caleb looked at the photo of Jack Lewis that Thomas had provided. The man looked exhausted and broken, yet there was a resilience in his eyes that Caleb recognized. It was the look of someone who would never give up. He felt a strange connection to this stranger. They both cared about the same children. Both had endured deep loss. And tomorrow, their lives would intersect in a way neither could have predicted. Caleb couldn't imagine how the meeting would go, but he knew, however difficult, he had to do the right thing. For Ellie, for Noah, and maybe, in some strange way, for himself. He lay down but couldn't sleep, picturing how the next day would unfold, how Jack would react to seeing his children again, how the kids would feel about going home. The thought that tomorrow might be his last day with them ached in a way he'd never experienced before. At around 3 in the morning, he heard soft crying from Noah's room. He got up immediately and went over. The baby was awake, restless in his crib. Caleb picked him up and began to rock him gently. Shh, it's all right, he whispered. Tomorrow you'll see your dad. You'll go back home. Noah looked up at him with those eyes so reminiscent of Lucas, and Caleb felt tears welling in his own. In such a short time, these children had changed something deep within him. I'm going to miss you, little guy, he murmured, kissing the baby's head, more than you'll ever know. As Noah drifted back to sleep in his arms, Caleb made a decision. No matter what, he would find a way to stay in these children's lives. He didn't know how Jack would react or whether he would be accepted, but he had to try. For the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. With that resolve, Caleb finally allowed himself to rest, Noah sleeping peacefully against his chest. Tomorrow would be a new beginning, for all of them. Morning was cold and clear as Caleb got into his car. He had chosen the least ostentatious model from his collection, a grey sedan that wouldn't stand out in a working-class neighborhood. Martin would stay behind at the mansion with the children. Caleb wanted to meet Jack alone, to see for himself what kind of man the kid's father was. Are you sure you don't want me to come along, sir? Martin asked as he opened the gate. I'm sure, Caleb replied. I have to do this by myself. On the back seat lay a folder containing Thomas Reeves's reports, including the address of the construction site where Jack worked. Caleb had memorized it, yet he felt a strange need to recheck the details, as though looking for an excuse to delay the inevitable. During the drive, he kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was back at the mansion with the kids. That morning, he had told Ellie he was going to get her father. Her eyes had lit up with a joy he'd never seen before. He'll be so happy, she'd said. He always comes for us when we're lost. Noah had been busy eating mashed banana, oblivious to the significance of the day. Caleb had watched him with a pang in his chest, knowing it might be one of the last times he fed the baby. The site was in a developing area on the outskirts of the city. A new residential complex was going up amid scaffolding and heavy machinery. Caleb parked at a discreet distance and spent a few minutes just observing. Dozens of workers moved around like organized ants. He glanced at the printed photo of Jack and scanned the men. It wasn't hard to spot him. Jack was in a more secluded section, working on a wall that looked like the facade of one of the houses. Even from afar, Caleb could see the exhaustion in the man, the slightly drooping shoulders. The motions that, while precise, lacked energy. Letting out a deep breath, Caleb got out of the car and walked toward the site. At the entrance, a supervisor stopped him. "Can I help you?" the man asked, eyeing the well-dressed stranger with suspicion. "I'm looking for one of your workers, Jack Lewis." The supervisor raised an eyebrow. "Something happened?" "Yes," Caleb replied, "but it's good news." "Could you take me to him?" The man hesitated, but something in Caleb's serious expression convinced him. "Follow me. Put this on." He handed Caleb a safety helmet. They walked across the site until they reached the area where Jack was working. Up close, Caleb could see more clearly the marks sorrow had left on the man's face, deep circles under his eyes, new worry lines, an untrimmed beard. But there was also something else, a quiet strength, an unyielding determination. "Jack," the supervisor called, "there's someone here to see you." Jack turned, trowel still in hand, fresh mortar dripping onto the ground. His eyes, though tired, were alert, exactly like Ellie's, Caleb realized with a jolt. "Thank you," Caleb said to the supervisor, who nodded and stepped away to give them privacy. For a moment, the two men simply studied each other in silence. Jack was about Caleb's height, but more muscular from manual labor. His eyes reflected confusion and a trace of hope he seemed afraid to allow himself. "You're Jack?" Caleb finally asked, breaking the silence. "Yeah," Jack replied, voice rough from disuse. "Who are you?" Caleb drew a deep breath. There was no gentle way to say this. "My name is Caleb Mason. Your kids are with me. They're safe." Time seemed to freeze. The trowel fell from Jack's hand, landing on the ground with a dull thud. His face cycled through disbelief, hope, relief, and finally, a raw, intense joy, so powerful it was almost painful to witness. "Ellie? Noah?" His words came out strangled. "They're alive. They're okay." "Yes," Caleb confirmed. "I found Ellie on the street about 10 days ago, holding Noah. They were cold and hungry, but now they're fully recovered." Jack clamped his hands over his face, his shoulders shaking with deep sobs, as though he'd been physically struck. Caleb waited in silence, giving the man time to absorb this news. When Jack finally lifted his face, it was transformed. The tears had washed away some of the pain in his eyes, replacing it with nearly frantic hope. "Where are they?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "Please take me to them." "They're at my house," Caleb replied. "I can take you there right now." Jack did not hesitate. He dropped his tools, pulled off his gloves and helmet. "Miguel," he called to a nearby co-worker. "I have to go. They found my kids." The man smiled genuinely. "Go, man, go get your little ones." On the way to the car, Jack bombarded Caleb with questions. How were the kids doing? Had Ellie been sick? Was Noah eating well? Were they sleeping? Caleb answered patiently, describing how he'd cared for them, the brief illness they'd had, how they were now happy and healthy. "They missed you," Caleb said as he drove. "Ellie talks about you all the time." Jack swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I thank you for taking care of them. I looked everywhere, every day. I couldn't even sleep anymore." "I know," Caleb said. "It's clear they're very loved." Jack looked out the window as they moved into a wealthier part of town. "How did you find them? What exactly happened?" Caleb recounted the story, omitting only how Noah reminded him of his long-lost brother. "Ellie said she went out looking for food or for you. I promised I'd be back for lunch," Jack said, guilt heavy in his voice. "But the job ran late. We didn't have a phone. I should have come home, no matter what." "Ellie understands," Caleb assured. "She's very mature for her age." "She's always been," Jack agreed with pride in his voice. "Ever since Mariana died, Ellie took on responsibilities no child should." When the car finally passed through the mansion gates, Jack couldn't hide his amazement. "You live here?" "I do," Caleb replied simply. Jack looked down at his dirty work clothes and calloused hands, painfully aware of the massive gap between his world and Caleb's. "I don't even know how to thank you," he said, almost embarrassed. "If you ever need anything at all—" "You don't owe me anything," Caleb interrupted, parking the car. "Seeing you reunited with your kids will be thanks enough." As they entered the house, Martin greeted them in the foyer. "The children are in the garden, sir." Jack barely registered the assistant's presence or the opulent surroundings. His eyes were fixed on the French doors leading to the back garden, where he could see a small figure running through the grass. Ellie was chasing a butterfly, laughing, her new dress swirling around her. Noah sat on a blanket under a tree, watching his sister with curious eyes. Jack stopped, unable to move, as though he feared the image would vanish if he approached. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. It was Caleb who finally broke the spell. "Ellie, someone's here to see you." The girl turned, meeting her father's gaze. For a suspended second, she just stared, as though she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Then her face lit up like the sun after a storm. "Dad!" she screamed, sprinting toward him with all her might. Jack ran forward, dropping to his knees on the well-kept lawn, just in time to catch Ellie in a crushing hug. She flung herself into his arms so forcefully that she nearly knocked him over. He clung to her, as if he would never let go, his whole body trembling. "Ellie, my Ellie," he whispered between sobs. "You're okay. You're here." Ellie was crying too, her small arms tight around his neck. "You came to get us." "I knew you'd come." Jack stood, still holding Ellie, and moved to Noah. The baby was smiling, clearly recognizing his father. Jack knelt again, picked up his son with his free arm, and hugged both children to his chest. "My kids," he murmured, rocking them gently. "I thought I'd lost you. I thought I'd never see you again." Ellie pulled her face away from her father's shoulder and looked him in the eyes. "Was it my fault?" she asked in a small, uncertain voice. "I shouldn't have left the house." Jack shook his head firmly. "No, honey, it was my fault. I tried to do everything by myself after your mom passed, but I failed. I should have come home like I promised. I should have taken better care of you." "You didn't fail, Dad," Ellie said, placing her little hand on his bearded cheek. "You're the best dad in the world." Jack closed his eyes, her words a balm to his tortured soul. He hugged the kids again, as though trying to reclaim every lost day at once. Several feet away, Caleb watched silently. He felt a powerful wave of emotion, joy for the children's happiness, gratitude for having made it possible, and also a pang of sadness. They would go back home with Jack. Their lives would move on without him. He felt a tear slip down his own face and let it fall unchecked. There was something sacred about that moment, worthy of being honored, even if it broke his heart. Jack finally stood up, still holding Noah in one arm and Ellie's hand with the other. He turned to Caleb, his face transformed by joy and gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, voice trembling. "You saved my kids. You brought us together." "They're wonderful children," Caleb replied, struggling to maintain composure. It was a privilege to take care of them. Ellie let go of her dad's hand and ran to Caleb, hugging his legs. "You'll visit us, right?" she asked, gazing up at him with big, hopeful eyes. "At our house?" Caleb knelt to her level. "If your dad allows, I'd love to visit." Jack nodded immediately. "Our place is small, but you'll always be welcome. Always." "Can Uncle Caleb come for dinner one day?" Ellie asked her father. "He makes really yummy pancakes." "Uncle Caleb?" Jack repeated, surprised, looking from Ellie to Caleb. "Sorry," Caleb said awkwardly. "I never suggested that. She just started calling me that a few days ago, and I didn't correct her." To Caleb's surprise, Jack smiled. "That's all right. Ellie always knows who belongs in the family." Something in the way Jack said it made Caleb feel a strange bond with him, as though they shared some unspoken truth, some deeper understanding they couldn't articulate yet. "Let's go inside," Caleb suggested. "Martin prepared lunch. Maybe you'd like to rest a bit before heading home." Jack nodded, grateful. Together, they walked back into the mansion, Jack carrying Noah, Ellie between the two men, holding each one's hand. It was an odd, unexpected arrangement, yet somehow it felt right. As they entered the house, Caleb noticed how Jack looked around in awe at the luxurious surroundings. Indeed, it was a different world from his own. The contrast between Jack's life and the mansion couldn't have been more stark. "This way," Caleb indicated, leading them to the dining room. Martin made something light for lunch. In the dining room, the table was set with discreet elegance. Martin had prepared a simple but delicious meal: sandwiches, salad, fruit and juice. Seeing the food, Ellie rushed to her usual seat. "Dad, sit here next to me," she called excitedly. And Noah goes over there in his chair. Jack placed the baby in the high chair Martin had set up, still looking a bit out of place in such a lavish setting. Caleb noticed his discomfort and tried to ease it. "Please, make yourself comfortable," he said. "I know it's a lot to take in at once." Jack nodded, taking a seat beside Ellie. "It is a lot, but all that matters is that we're together again." During lunch, Ellie took charge as hostess, telling her dad about everything she'd done during her days at the mansion, the drawings, the garden games, the stories Caleb read before bed. Jack listened with rapt attention, smiling, soaking up every word like a parched man. Caleb stayed mostly silent, watching the father and children interact. There was such a natural connection, a genuine love. Though he felt a twinge of sadness at the thought of them leaving soon, he was mostly glad that things were as they should be. "Hey, how's Tico?" Ellie asked suddenly, worried about the dog. "He's good," Jack assured her. "He's been looking all over the house for you." "Can I bring him my drawings to see?" Ellie asked, making Jack laugh. "Of course you can, princess. He'll love it." After lunch, Ellie took Jack to see her drawings in the spare room where she'd been staying the past few days, while Caleb stayed in the dining room with Noah, who was finishing his mashed food. The baby gazed at him with those eyes that had touched him so deeply the first night. "I'm going to miss you, little one," Caleb murmured, wiping Noah's face with a towel. "More than you'll ever know." Noah grinned, gums mostly toothless, and reached out for Caleb, who picked him up. For a moment, they stayed like that, baby snug in the arms of the man who'd taken him in, oblivious to the complexities of the adult world, impending departures, or broken hearts. Jack returned to the room with Ellie, who held one of her favorite drawings. "She wants to show you the house she drew," Jack explained, smiling. Ellie held up the paper proudly. It was a simple drawing of a house with a bright blue wall, a small white dog, and 4 stick figures, 1 large figure, and 3 smaller ones. "Look, Uncle Caleb," she said. "It's our house. That's Dad, that's me, that's Noah, and that's Tico." Caleb crouched down to see it better. "It's beautiful, Ellie. You're a very talented artist." The girl smiled but then frowned, as though something was missing. She grabbed a pencil from the table and quickly added another figure next to the others. "There," she said, satisfied. "Now it's you too." Caleb felt a knot in his throat. Jack, meanwhile, watched his daughter with a complex expression. Surprise, understanding, and something else harder to define. "It's getting late," Caleb said, glancing at the sky outside, where the sun was beginning to set. "You must be tired. Why don't you stay here tonight? I can take you home tomorrow." Jack hesitated. "We don't want to trouble you any more than—" "Please, Dad," Ellie interrupted, tugging on his sleeve. "I have so many things to show you, and the room is really cool." Jack looked at Caleb, who nodded encouragingly. "It's no trouble at all. You can rest properly." "All right," Jack finally agreed. "Thank you." Martin, appearing discreetly in the doorway, nodded to Caleb, indicating he would prepare the rooms. Noah, still in Caleb's arms, yawned widely, his eyes beginning to close. "I think someone's ready for bed," Caleb remarked, rocking the baby gently. "He likes you," Jack noted, seeing how comfortable his son was in Caleb's arms. "He usually doesn't go to strangers that easily." "We're not strangers anymore," Caleb smiled. "We've spent a lot of time together these past days." While Ellie showed her dad the rest of the house, recounting all her little adventures, Caleb took Noah upstairs and put him to bed as he'd done every night since finding him. There was a comforting familiarity to the ritual. The warm bath, the fresh diaper, the bottle, the softly hummed lullaby. And though he knew he wouldn't be doing this much longer, he savored every moment. When Noah finally drifted off, Caleb lingered a while, watching him. The baby's face was serene and innocent, tiny fingers clutching the blanket, breathing softly. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to fully feel the sadness of the coming separation, before tucking it away again. Downstairs, he found Jack alone in the living room, gazing out the window at the garden under the outdoor lights. "Ellie?" Caleb asked. She fell asleep while showing me her books, Jack said with a smile. She's exhausted, poor thing. So much excitement in one day. Caleb nodded, understanding. Would you like something to drink? Coffee, tea, something stronger? Coffee would be good, Jack replied. Haven't slept well in days. Caleb called Martin and asked for 2 coffees. When the assistant left, an easy silence settled between them. They had a lot to discuss, but also a mutual understanding that some conversations required the right time and place. I'd like to talk more, Caleb said finally, about the kids, about what happened, about everything, but maybe tomorrow, after we've rested, Jack agreed. Tomorrow is good. We have a lot to talk about. There was a certain weight in Jack's tone, a thoughtful seriousness that suggested he, too, felt there was more to this meeting than mere coincidence. Caleb realized Jack was studying him, as if searching his face for something. The coffee arrived, and they drank in a comfortable silence. Through the window, they could see the garden under the moonlight, tree shadows swaying gently in the night breeze. It's a beautiful place, Jack finally remarked. It is, Caleb agreed, but it's never felt as alive as it has these past days with the kids. Jack nodded with understanding. They have that effect. They change everything around them. When they finished their coffee, Jack glanced toward the stairs. I think I'll go check on the kids. I'll come with you, Caleb offered. Together, they went upstairs to the room where Ellie and Noah were sleeping. Ellie had dozed off cuddling one of the teddy bears Caleb had bought for her. Noah slept quietly in his crib, his breathing soft and steady. Jack approached silently and adjusted Ellie's blanket, then checked to make sure Noah was covered. Caleb stood back, feeling a swirl of emotions he couldn't fully name. Watching Jack with his children was like seeing puzzle pieces snap into place. Yet there was also something familiar in the scene, something that touched deep recesses of his memory. Leaving the door slightly open, they stepped out. Caleb made a sudden decision. Jack, he said softly, I know it's late, but I'd like to talk to you now. In the garden. Jack looked surprised but nodded. Sure. The kids are out cold. Caleb gestured toward the stairs. Come on, there's something important I need to tell you. Without further explanation, the 2 men went down to the doors leading outside to the moonlit garden. The conversation that would change their lives forever was about to begin. The mansion's garden at night was a place of contrasts. Soft lights illuminated the trees and flower beds, creating dancing shadows and quiet pockets of darkness. A full moon hung overhead, large and silver, a silent witness to the moment unfolding. Caleb and Jack walked to a stone bench beneath the old oak, the same spot where, days earlier, Ellie had drawn with chalk while Caleb watched, already feeling that strange, unexplainable connection. For a few seconds, both sat in silence, contemplating the garden. The night was cool but not freezing, and the aroma of nocturnal flowers filled the air with a subtle fragrance. I don't know if I've said it yet, Jack began, finally breaking the silence, but you saved my children. I'll never forget that. Caleb nodded, recognizing the gratitude in those simple words. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't, Jack said with conviction. Most people would have just called social services, or worse, ignored 2 kids out in the snow. Caleb knew he was right. Big cities often breed indifference as a defense mechanism. People pass by others in need every day, avoiding eye contact, carrying on. There was something about them, Caleb admitted. Something that hit me in a way I can't fully explain. Jack turned to look at him, curious. What do you mean? Caleb took a deep breath. Now was the moment he'd been putting off ever since seeing Jack at the construction site. When I was 8, he began, voice quieter now, I lost my younger brother. He was 5 years old. He disappeared while we were playing in our backyard. Jack frowned, surprised by the sudden shift in topic, but alert. It was just a normal day, Caleb went on. We were playing hide and seek. It was my turn to look. I counted to 10, opened my eyes, and he never appeared again. My God, Jack murmured. That's terrible. The police searched for weeks. My parents never gave up. They hired private investigators for years, but we never found a clue, not a single trace. It was like he vanished into thin air. Caleb paused, reliving that day, his growing panic, calling his brother's name around the yard, the neighborhood mobilizing, the sirens, the search dogs, the posters, the TV interviews. Then the silence, the empty bedroom, the empty seat at the table, the pain in his parents' eyes. "What was his name?" Jack asked, sounding oddly tense. Caleb looked him in the eye. "Lucas." Jack's reaction was immediate and physical. He flinched as though shocked, recoiling slightly on the bench. His eyes widened, and one hand clutched at his chest. "What's wrong?" Caleb asked, watching him closely. "I don't know," Jack said, bewildered. "I can't remember. But that name, it shakes me, like a distant echo." Caleb felt his heart pounding. "Jack, I need to show you something. Will you come back inside for a minute?" Jack nodded, still visibly shaken. Together, they returned to the house in silence. Caleb led him to the office, where he opened a drawer and took out an old leather-bound photo album. "This is one of the few personal items I took from my parents' home when they died," he explained, placing the album on the desk. Carefully, Caleb opened the album to a specific page. There was a photograph of two boys, one around 8, the other about 5. The older boy had dark hair and a serious smile. The younger boy grinned broadly, missing one of his front teeth. "That's me," Caleb said, pointing to the older boy. "And that... Lucas," Jack completed in a whisper. His hands trembled as he touched the photo. Something about the younger boy's face, the shape of his eyes, his smile, sparked a deep, unexplainable recognition in Jack. "I don't know how," Jack said, voice quivering, "but it hurts inside." He pressed a hand to his heart, like a memory I can't reach. Caleb watched Jack's reaction, feeling equal parts hope and fear. "From the moment I saw Noah in Ellie's arms, something hit me. He has the same eyes, the same face shape Lucas had. And when I saw you today at the site, it was like seeing a ghost, my brother all grown up." Jack tore his gaze from the photograph, confusion etched on his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I think you might be Lucas," Caleb replied plainly. "My missing brother." Jack shook his head in disbelief. "But I remember my childhood. I remember my parents. Are you saying those memories are fake?" "I don't know," Caleb admitted. "Maybe you were adopted. Maybe someone took you that day and raised you as their own. You were very young. Memories at 5 can be hazy." Jack stared again at the photo, as if searching for answers in the smiling faces of those two boys. "There's a way to find out," Caleb said. "A DNA test." "DNA test," Jack repeated, almost in a daze. "I can arrange it tomorrow," Caleb went on. "It's quick. We'll know in 24 hours. Jack finally tore his eyes from the photo and looked at Caleb. "Yes," he agreed. "Let's do that." The following day passed in anxious limbo. Jack and the children stayed at the mansion. Caleb arranged for one of the city's top labs to collect samples first thing that morning, paying whatever it took for the fastest results. Ellie sensed something unusual was happening, but Caleb and Jack decided not to tell her yet. They spent the day trying to act normal, taking the kids to play in the garden, cooking lunch together, watching a movie in the mansion's mini theater. Late the next afternoon, the envelope arrived. Martin brought it directly to Caleb, who asked Jack to join him in the office. Ellie, ever curious, trailed behind her father at a distance. Caleb's hands shook as he opened the envelope. He read the report quickly, looked up at Jack and simply nodded, unable to speak. Jack took the paper. There it was, in clinical, precise language, probability of relatedness index 99.9%. Conclusion: the tested individuals share a biological sibling relationship. Positive. They were brothers. The paper slipped from Jack's hands. For a moment, he stood motionless, processing a truth that upended everything he believed about himself. Then, as though a dam had broken, he started to cry. Caleb stepped forward, tears in his eyes as well, and the two men, two brothers, embraced. 24 years of separation, loss, and diverging lives collapsed in that moment. "I thought I'd never see you again," Caleb said, his voice breaking with emotion. That was when they noticed Ellie standing in the doorway, watching with wide eyes. She had heard everything. "So you're my uncle?" she asked, taking a hesitant step into the room. Caleb pulled away from Jack and looked at his niece, his actual niece. "I am," he answered, a smile emerging through his tears. Ellie ran to him and threw her arms around him. "You're the best uncle in the world," she declared with absolute childlike certainty. Jack looked on, still dazed by the revelation, but also amazed at how readily Ellie accepted and celebrated the news. For her, it was simple. Caleb, who was already special, was now officially family. The world made more sense that way. "How are we going to tell Noah?" Ellie asked, still hugging Caleb. "He's too little to understand right now," Jack replied, wiping his tears. "But we'll tell him the whole story one day." "The story of how we got lost and found each other again," Caleb said, turning to his newly found brother. That night, after the kids were asleep, the brothers stayed up late, trying to piece together the puzzle of their past. There were so many questions, so many gaps to fill, but now they had time. Time they'd once believed lost forever, miraculously returned. The circle, in some way, was complete. The weeks following the discovery were a period of transition. Jack had loose ends to tie up, telling the construction site he was leaving, packing the few sentimental belongings he owned, retrieving Tico, the little white dog who barked happily upon reuniting with Ellie and Noah. Caleb wanted the move to be as comfortable as possible, so he helped with everything, hiring movers for Jack's belongings, arranging a special room for the children, complete with walls Ellie could paint, and even setting aside space in the garden for Tico. On the day they officially moved in, the house seemed to hum with a new energy. It was no longer the silent, immaculate mansion it had been. Now there was noise, motion, life. "Are you sure we won't be in the way?" Jack asked for the umpteenth time, carrying a box of Noah's toys inside. "Absolutely sure," Caleb insisted, taking the box from him. This place was always too big for just one person. Now it finally makes sense. Ellie was running through the hallways, exploring every corner with Tico at her heels. The pup, initially intimidated by the size of the house, soon realized he had a lot more room to run around. Noah, meanwhile, crawled quickly behind them, determined not to be left behind. Martin watched it all with a mixture of surprise and approval. In all his years working for Caleb, he had never seen his employer so happy. There was a lightness in his movements, a softness in his features that hadn't been there before. "Martin," Caleb called, noticing his assistant standing by the doorway. "We'll probably need more shelves in the kids' room." "Ellie has a lot of books." "I'll take care of it immediately, sir," Martin replied with a subtle smile. "Perhaps more pillows for the living room, too. Mr. Jack mentioned he likes to watch movies with the children at night." "Excellent idea," Caleb agreed. "And Martin?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." "For everything." Martin nodded and left, sensing his work now had a larger purpose than ever. In the days that followed, the house changed even more. The kitchen, once rarely used by Caleb, became the heart of the mansion. Jack, who had learned to cook out of necessity after his wife died, now cooked with enthusiasm, reveling in a kitchen far better equipped than his old one. The smell of fresh bread, tomato sauce, and cakes baking in the oven filled the halls. Many times, Caleb simply stood in the doorway, watching Jack show Ellie how to crack eggs or shape cookie dough, while Noah observed from his high chair, clapping. The children's toys started appearing in the most unexpected places: a little car under the dining table, a doll forgotten in Caleb's office chair, brightly colored building blocks in random corners. Surprisingly, none of it bothered him in the slightest. One morning, about a month after the move, Caleb was coming downstairs when he heard a little voice. Noah had recently begun talking, small words, still imperfect, but they lit up the house with joy. T, the voice persisted, determined. Curious, Caleb followed the sound to the living room. Noah was standing, holding onto the couch, stretching out his arms the moment he spotted Caleb. "T, Uncle," he finally managed, his face shining with triumph. Caleb froze. It was the first time Noah had called him that, acknowledging, in his baby way, the bond between them. He felt a lump in his throat and blinked back tears. "That's right, champ," he said, lifting his nephew into his arms. "Uncle, I'm your uncle," Noah clapped, pleased with himself, then pointed to the bookshelf. "Boo, K," he said, another recent addition to his vocabulary. "A book? You want Uncle to read you a story?" Caleb asked, already heading for the shelves. "Yes," Noah exclaimed with that big smile that always reminded Caleb of his once missing, now found brother. Jack appeared in the doorway. Having overheard, he wore a discreet smile. "He's been working on that for days," he remarked. "Wanted to surprise you." "He succeeded," Caleb answered, still a bit choked up. Jack leaned against the doorframe, watching as Caleb sat on the rug with Noah in his lap, opening a colorful book. "I never thought my brother would be a billionaire who looks like a babysitter," he teased. Caleb looked up, smiling. "Neither did I think my brother was a real-life hero." Their eyes met, laden with the shared meaning of that unlikely journey which had reunited them. Jack acknowledged the praise with a small nod and left quietly, leaving uncle and nephew immersed in the magic of the story. As the days rolled by, routines formed, simple, everyday, precious. Breakfast was always together, no matter how busy Caleb's day. They all sat at the kitchen table, yes, the kitchen, not the formal dining room, and chatted, laughed, and ate. Ellie would talk about her vivid dreams, often full of elaborate adventures. Noah would try out new words, making everyone laugh with his baby pronunciation. Jack and Caleb would exchange knowing glances, both still amazed by the improbable luck that had brought them together. On weekends, the lawn became a soccer field, a racetrack, a campsite, or whatever else Ellie's imagination cooked up. Caleb, who never had much time for outdoor activities, discovered the pleasure of running barefoot on the grass, building sandcastles in the sandbox he'd had installed, and feeling the sun on his face without worrying about time passing. And there were quieter moments, equally precious. Sunday afternoons when they'd all cram onto the living room couch to watch a kids' movie Ellie had chosen, or evenings reading together in the library, each with their own book, simply enjoying each other's company in silence. Mornings when Caleb found Jack on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise, swapping stories about their separate lives. It was on one of these mornings that they finally talked about their childhood, the brief time they shared, and the separate ones they lived. "Do you remember anything?" Caleb asked carefully, unsure if it would stir painful memories. "From before, I mean," Jack frowned, concentrating. Since the DNA test, fragments of memory had begun surfacing, disconnected flashes rather than continuous recollections. "I remember a dog," he said eventually. "Big, brown. He'd lick my face and I'd laugh." "Max," Caleb said with a nostalgic smile. "He was a Labrador. He adored you, followed you everywhere. And I remember someone pushing me on a swing. Was that you?" Caleb nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "Yes. In our parents' backyard. You were always asking to go higher." Jack smiled, gazing into the distance. "Funny how I did the same with Ellie. Every Sunday at the park, she'd want me to push her higher on the swing. Some things are in our blood, I guess," Caleb remarked. For a moment, they sat in silence, both pondering the weight of these rediscovered connections. "What were your adoptive parents like?" Caleb finally asked. "The ones who raised you?" Jack mulled it over. "They were good," he said simply. "Not perfect, but they loved me, taught me to work hard and be honest. We never had much, but we never lacked the basics." "Do you think they knew about you being taken?" It was a difficult question both had avoided. If Jack had not been legally adopted, someone had committed a crime, someone he'd called mom or dad. "I don't know," Jack admitted. "My dad, the man who raised me, died when I was 15, an accident at the construction site. My mom passed away a few years later, from cancer. Nothing they ever did hinted at anything suspicious. They treated me like a dearly loved only child." "Maybe we'll never know," Caleb said, unsure if that was comforting or frustrating. "Maybe it doesn't matter anymore," Jack suggested. "Life tore us apart, but it found a way to bring us back after everything. We're here." Caleb considered that. The decades lost, yes, but also the improbable miracle of being side by side now, with Ellie and Noah part of his life. in a mansion that had turned into a home. "Now we have everything that counts," he said finally. Jack nodded, raising his mug in a silent toast. Caleb did likewise, and for a moment, the painful past seemed less significant in the face of the present they had won. That afternoon, watching Jack play with the kids in the yard, Caleb felt a certainty settle in his heart. For the first time in many years, perhaps since the day Lucas disappeared, he felt entirely present, whole. The empire he'd built, the professional achievements, the amassed wealth, all of it now seemed like a means to an end, not the end itself. Those means had allowed him to offer a safe, comfortable home to his rediscovered brother and his niece and nephew. He had the resources to help Jack rebuild his life, to give the kids opportunities their hard-working father alone could never provide. And in return, he'd gained something far more precious. Ellie's laughter echoing through once silent corridors, Noah's unsteady footsteps as he learned to walk, holding his uncle's hands, the late-night talks with Jack recalling the past and planning the future. Small moments that teamed together formed a full life. Martin entered the garden discreetly, approaching Caleb. "Sir, the architects have arrived to discuss the annex renovation." Caleb nodded. He decided to turn one wing of the mansion into a workspace for Jack, who'd shown interest in learning more about sustainable construction, combining his practical experience with Caleb's resources and contacts. "Tell them I'll be there in a minute, Martin," he said. "Just one more minute." The assistant withdrew, and Caleb returned his gaze to the scene before him. Ellie was now trying to teach Tico to shake hands, while Noah tried to imitate the dog for Jack's amusement. It was simple, everyday, perfect. Smiling, he felt profound gratitude for a fate that, after so many detours and losses, had finally brought them all home. A home that was now truly alive. 6 months had passed since Jack and the children moved into the mansion. Fall had given way to winter, and the season's first snowfall dusted the outside world, covering the garden in a soft, silent white. It was a Sunday morning. Caleb had woken earlier than usual and gone downstairs to make coffee. Over the past months, he'd learned to brew a decent cup, not as good as Jack's, but passable. While the rest of the house slept, he savored these quiet moments, so different from the loneliness he once knew. Standing in the kitchen, watching the snow through the window with a steaming mug in his hands, he reflected on how much had changed in a year. The previous winter, he had been alone, lost in the emptiness of a life filled with material success, but devoid of genuine connection. Now his house was a home sometimes noisy and chaotic, but wonderfully alive. The backyard, once meticulously maintained, now featured a colorful swing set and a sandbox. The office, once his private sanctuary, was regularly strewn with Ellie's drawings. Even his luxury car had been fitted with child seats, and he wouldn't change a thing. "Uncle Caleb?" a small voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find Ellie at the kitchen door, still in her pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. She was holding something in her hands, a piece of colorful paper. "Morning, sweetheart," he greeted her. "You're up early?" "I had an idea," she replied, stepping into the kitchen. "And I couldn't wait to finish it." She came closer, clutching the paper to her chest as though it were a precious treasure. "I made it for us," she said, finally holding out the drawing to Caleb. Setting his mug on the counter, he took the paper carefully. It was a vibrant design in colored markers on a large sheet. Ellie's drawing skills had improved greatly in the past months. The art classes Caleb arranged were paying off. On the paper, 4 figures held hands in a circle. Despite the childlike style, each was easy to recognize. Jack, tall and strong with dark hair. Caleb, a bit shorter and apparently in a suit. Ellie in her favorite floral dress, and Noah, small and chubby with a huge grin. Tico was there too, a little white blur at Ellie's feet. In the center of the circle, Ellie had drawn a giant red heart. At the top of the page, in big colorful letters, she'd written, "My happy family." Caleb felt a tightness in his throat as he looked at that simple yet profound representation of what they had become, a family, his family. "It's beautiful," he managed, his voice slightly shaky. Ellie beamed, her eyes shining with pride. "Because now we're together," she explained matter-of-factly. With an uncle and everything. An uncle and everything, he echoed, smiling through the emotion welling up inside. At that moment, Jack appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying Noah. The boy, now almost a year and a half old, grinned widely when he saw Caleb and stretched out his arms. "Uncle," Noah exclaimed, one of the few words he pronounced perfectly. "Look who's awake," Caleb said, handing the drawing to Jack and lifting Noah into his arms. Jack studied the artwork for a moment, a gentle smile easing his features. "Masterpiece, Ellie," he praised. "I think it deserves a special place in the house." "On the fridge," Ellie suggested instantly. The fridge had become her personal art gallery, covered in her drawings. "I was thinking something more permanent," Jack countered, sharing a knowing look with Caleb. "Maybe framed in the living room." Ellie's eyes went wide. "Really? Like a real painting?" "Exactly like a real painting," Caleb confirmed. "It's an important piece after all. It shows the most important people in my life." Ellie practically vibrated with excitement at the idea, hopping over to hug her dad and then her uncle, who was still holding Noah. "Breakfast?" Jack suggested, smiling at the girl's enthusiasm. "How about pancakes to celebrate the new masterpiece?" "With chocolate syrup?" Ellie asked hopefully. "With chocolate syrup," Jack promised. "But first, let's all sit in the living room. I think we deserve a moment of laziness before we start the day." The four of them headed to the living room, where a fire crackled in the fireplace, warding off the creeping winter chill. They all settled on the large, unsoft couch, Caleb with Noah on his lap, Jack with his arm around Ellie, and the new drawing carefully set on the coffee table. For a moment, they just relaxed together, enjoying the warmth of each other's presence, listening to Noah's contented little noises as he played with the buttons on Caleb's shirt. "Do you know something?" Jack said, breaking the comfortable silence. "I think this is the warmest winter I've ever had." Caleb glanced toward the window, where snowflakes were drifting down more steadily, and smiled. "I couldn't agree more." Ellie, always literal, frowned. "But it's snowing, Dad. It's real winter." Jack chuckled, pulling her closer. "It's a different kind of warmth, Princess, the kind that comes from inside." Ellie seemed to think about that. "Oh," she said finally, "it's because we love each other." "Exactly," Jack said, looking at Caleb over Ellie's head. "Because we love each other." Caleb met Jack's gaze, feeling a rush of gratitude for everything they'd found, each other, this family, this moment. Noah chose that instant to let out a huge yawn, snuggling closer to Caleb, perfectly at ease in his uncle's arms. "So, about those pancakes," Jack said after a moment, getting up. "Our little artist needs to eat, right?" Ellie jumped off the couch, invigorated by the promise of breakfast. "Can I help make the batter?" "Of course," Jack replied. "You're my official kitchen assistant." As Jack and Ellie disappeared toward the kitchen, Caleb stayed on the couch with Noah, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. In just over a year, his entire life had been transformed. He thought of that night he found Ellie and Noah on the snowy sidewalk. If he had chosen a different route home, if he had ignored the little girl on the curb as so many others might have, if he had simply called the authorities instead of taking them in, so many small decision points that could have drastically changed their destinies. Maybe it was luck, maybe fate, maybe, as Jack once suggested, it was life finding a way to fix something that had gone wrong long ago. In any case, Caleb knew he would never again be the lonely man in the empty house, surrounded by material wealth but starved of genuine bonds. Now he had a purpose beyond accumulating money or closing deals. He had a brother to share memories with and make new ones. He had a niece whose creativity and optimism lit up each day. He had a nephew whose smile reminded him that the past, however painful, did not define the future. He had a family. Noah was now fully asleep, breathing gently. From the kitchen came the sounds of Ellie and Jack, clanking utensils, giggles. Ellie's animated voice describing exactly how she wanted her pancakes. The sounds of life. The sounds of home. Caleb gently kissed his nephew's head and gazed again at Ellie's drawing on the coffee table. My happy family. So simple. So true. Taking care not to wake Noah, He stood and headed for the kitchen to join Jack and Ellie. The baby nestled deeper into his arms, secure even in slumber. Outside, winter pressed on. The snow fell more heavily now, the wind rattling the windows, the world turning cold and white. But inside, in the heart of that home, there was only warmth. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like, because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.